I'm not necessarily looked at as the clean person in society. In fact, I think I'm somewhat repulsive to other people. And I've just kind of taken this onto myself that maybe I'm just one of those untouchables that can't get any help, that certainly can't seem to get the attention of God. Is that you, dear listener? Good morning and welcome to God's Resistance. God's Resistance is local in Wilkes-Barre in the Wyoming Valley and spreading elsewhere. If you need someone to talk to or pray with and are interested in joining a small group to help you live as a disciple of Christ, then stay tuned for contact info. My name is Eric Samborski, and I want to thank you for tuning into God's Resistance, where we resist sin, self, the devil, and the world. You can hear us every Sunday at 9 a.m. on WITK 1550 AM and 94.7 FM. If you miss this radio program or any of them, then look for the God's Resistance podcast on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube at 9 a.m. every Sunday where these are uploaded, and you're going to find other content on there as well. You can find us at godsresistance.com and on Facebook, Gab TV, and YouTube at God's Resistance. That is spelled GODSRESISTANCE. I want you to like, follow, and turn on notifications for helpful spiritual content. You can also contact us at gods.resistance@gmail.com or give us a call at 570-362-7782. Also, you will find us, weather permitting, in the public square in Wilkes-Barre at 11 a.m. every Sunday morning. We would like to see you there. We've already met plenty of you. You have told us how God has helped you. You have told us your woes and troubles, and we want to be a servant to you in the spiritual domain. So please show up at 11 a.m. every Sunday morning at the public square outside, weather permitting. Now let's listen in on today's briefing. Sometimes we may find it difficult to maybe be around a certain class of people. We all have natural affinities. There's people that we get along with great, and there's people that we don't. There's people that are repulsive to us in some measure or form, and then there are some people that are attractive to us. I think that it's pretty safe to say that we like cleanliness rather than we like dirtiness if we can help it, right? I remember when I was a small child, we would go to my grandmother, which had been on my mother's side, so my mother's mother. We would go to my grandmother and grandfather's house for about 2 weeks every summer, and we'd spend time with them. I didn't think a whole lot of it, but I really loved that. I appreciated them. I appreciated the time we got to spend with them. But my father's mother, I didn't know as well because we only saw her maybe once a year. She was different than my other grandmother. She smoked cigarettes a lot. There, after she had passed away, I remember looking up on the ceiling and seeing a giant yellow circle or yellow ring up on the ceiling above her head from where she had smoked. Her apartment just kind of stunk. It didn't smell clean, and she didn't feel to me as approachable and as clean as my other grandmother. And I had an inner conflict as a kid because I thought, I don't want to just completely shun my grandmother because I know it's my dad's mother. But at the same time, I remember being afraid to give her a kiss, afraid that her lips would touch my face. And I guess as a child, I was thinking she's just kind of dirtier and she's not as clean. And it was probably the cigarette smoking, all of that put together and my not knowing her as well. It made me put up a wall. Now, just like a good kid, I did give my grandmother a hug, told her I loved her. She gave me a kiss, all that good stuff. But I noticed that, it wasn't easy to approach her because of perhaps what I had seen. You may have experiences like that just in general with people. Could be your family members. It could just be friends. It could be people that you don't know that maybe you just meet as you're going about your day. I know when I pastored at a place before we moved here to the Wilkes-Barre area, there was a particular man that I spent some time with. He told me that he went to a very prestigious music school. He had composed classical pieces for somebody that was very famous. for ballet dancing and such. And I thought, I've been told so many stories before. I've had my leg pulled. And I thought, this is just another one of those stories that he's telling me. And eventually he's going to ask me for money. He's going to ask me for other things. And he's going to con me. Those were kind of the cautions that I had. But I ended up looking up this man. I looked up his past. And I found out this guy's telling the truth. Everything that he said is real, is what happened. Well, I went to go to his home. He had been frequenting my house, going up on the porch, peering inside of the windows, 5 o'clock in the morning, midday, late at night, putting his face up against the glass and looking into my house. And my wife would say, Eric, can you do something about this? We're trying to do homeschool right here, and he's peering inside of the house, and it just makes me uncomfortable. And I would understand that. I ended up having a talk with a man and said, I may be the only friend you have in this city. He said, that's probably about right. And I said, well, if that's the case, we're going to have to make this work. We're going to have to make some boundaries here. And so I agreed that I'll come to your house on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm going to meet with you. You got a full hour of my attention each one of those days. I will meet with you. And he said, okay. So he told me where he lived. I went there. I opened the door, and it was disgusting. He had trash piled about 4 feet high, flies everywhere. There was feces on the floor, urine. There was like a pathway that you could walk through, to the sink, the kitchen sink, which was full of just putrid looking things. And then a pathway to the bathroom, and then a pathway to he probably had like 3 or 4 mattresses stacked on top of each other in there. And I guess his apartment was government funded. But it was very uncleanly. He was very uncleanly. And I remember thinking, Lord, this is somebody you died for. So I just have to kind of go with it. Even though internally I was thinking, there's not a good place to sit down here. It's so filthy. I remember at one point sitting down on a chair, and I had put my hand down like I normally would sitting on a chair, just kind of steady myself going on the way down. And I put my hand in what appeared to be just a pile of snot. And it was on my hand, and I was really grossed out. But I thought, Lord, you died for this soul, so I've got boogers on my hands because of this. But, Lord, you're going to help me. And, humanly speaking, I would be quite repulsed at certain things. And I can't say that, God doesn't take that sense of cleanliness out of us the moment we get saved. But he also does put his love within us that helps us to see past what we see in our just human eyes here. And with that, I am just taking that by way of introduction to who Jesus is. This is a series that I've been doing for a little bit called Encounters with Christ. And this encounter particularly is when Jesus cleanses a leper. You find this account in Matthew chapter 8, verses 2 through 4, Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 45, and Luke chapter 5, verses 12 through 16. Now, these are all synthesized together using the ESV translation. A guy, R.D. Myers, apparently had done this, which I find very helpful. So I'll be reading from this, and we're going to kind of get the heartbeat of Jesus, and we're going to see how that links up to the introduction that I just gave. But let's just start in. While he, Jesus, was in one of the cities, there came a man full of leprosy. And when he saw Jesus, he knelt before him, fell on his face, imploring him and begged him, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus, moved with pity, stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing the gift that Moses commanded for a proof to them. But he went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news, so that now even more the report about him went abroad. Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and great crowds gathered to him from every quarter to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Wow. So here we have an account that's before us Jesus was going around from town to town, village to village, city to city. And he happened to be in this one particular city that we're reading about right now. Now, Jesus, his ministry was far different than the ministries that you and I are used to in America, in the Western culture. Ministries usually have a home. They got a building, they've got a place. With Jesus, every place was his ministry. He was outside. He was in the town square. He was off in the villages somewhere. Jesus was where the people were. And this is where we find him now. He was in one of the cities that he would go around and preach and talk to people. And there was a man full of leprosy. Now, we don't hear much of leprosy, say, in America. I know in India, there are leper colonies still. In some other countries, there's still that happening in our present day. But it's worthy of note that it says there came a man full of leprosy. This wasn't just a little bit of leprosy. You read inside of the Old Testament, and there were certain strictures or standards by which spots were to be examined to see if something was leprous or not, because it was highly contagious disease that would rot away their flesh and cause terrible pain, tumors, lumps, scabs, growths, all sorts of different things. And it literally wasted people away over the course of years. And it could take 30 years or better, and people could live with it, but they just kind of waste away piecemeal throughout this time. Now, this, we find Jesus was in a city, and this man came to him. I wonder why. I say, I wonder why. I think it's pretty apparent why he came to Jesus. He had heard, no doubt, about the miracles that Jesus had performed, how he had healed people before. Massive amounts of people had come to him for healing. I believe, if memory serves me correct, he had already been at Peter's house, healed his mother-in-law, and outside there were crowds and throngs of people that were filled with demons, possessed with demons, had all sorts of sicknesses and infirmities. And it was said this was fulfilled by what was spoken of the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 53, that he took on our sicknesses and he took on our griefs. And that was a fulfillment of the prophecy that he was healing these people. No doubt he had heard about it, spread all over the place. What Jesus was doing was not done in a corner now. And Jesus happened to be in the same city he was. So this leper probably thought, now's my chance. Nobody else is going to help me. In that time, and I think most of today, leprosy is not a curable disease by any kind of man-made methods or standards. Especially in those times, people realize that if there's going to be any cure, it's going to have to come from the hand of God, because we can't do anything to stop it. So what they would do is they would take these lepers and they would separate them from the rest of the people. So they usually lived in a colony outside of the city walls by themselves. We read about this in the Old Testament. There was an account of where I believe it was Samaria was under siege. And at that point, the lepers are outside of the city, and they're thinking, well, there's no food that was in the city that normally would be brought out to them to eat. So they thought, we should just go over to the enemy camp and see if maybe they'll have pity on us and feed us some food. And if they don't, we're going to die anyways. So we saw a little glimpse in these lepers that are outside of a colony, outside of the city, and somehow food was brought to them. But in this time, the city was under siege. No food was brought to them. And the story was that the enemies ended up leaving. The lepers were able to eat food. They shared that news with the rest of the people, and God's people were helped. I say all that just to say that the lepers, there they were, inside or outside of the city, separated because they were contagious. There were certain laws in the Levitical book, but in the Levitical priesthood, as to examinations if hair had grown in a thing, what color the spots were, and what it looked like when it wasn't leprous and what it looked like when it was still under question. Leprosy didn't just stay inside of somebody's skin, but could travel to, it says, in their walls of their homes, in their garments. Leprosy was invasive and very troublesome and very contagious. And so here they were separated from the common people. Now you can kind of get a little bit of the thrust as to what happens when we're coming into this, that there came a man full of leprosy to Jesus. In case you've just tuned in, you are listening to God's Resistance, where we resist sin, self, the world, and the devil. You can hear us every Sunday at 9 a.m. on WITK 1550 AM and 94.7 FM. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at God's Resistance. That is GODSRESISTANCE. You can also email us at gods.resistance@gmail.com or call us at 570-362-7782. So now that we got the full picture, at least in part, isn't that funny? I say the full picture in part. We've got a fuller picture of what was happening there. These people are usually separate from everyone else because of how contagious they are, and yet this man, despite all the stigma that was on him because of being a leper, despite his being separated from the rest of the people because of how contagious he was, he determined that he had to make his way to Jesus. There was something in Jesus Christ that this man wanted, and no doubt it was healing. This man was full of leprosy, so he didn't just have one spot. Apparently, if you were to look at this man, you probably would have saw it all up and down this man. It would have been a hideous sight to see this man. And no doubt, disciples that were around him, and maybe others that were nearby, when they saw this man, jumped back and screamed out of fright that this man full of leprosy was coming anywhere near them. I wonder if at those points, or at that time, his disciples and the others that were around turned around and kind of run, took, 30 yards of space between this leprous man and themselves. And they turn around and then they see Jesus, their master, and he's still planted where he was. He didn't move. He stayed there as this leprous man full of leprosy comes running toward Jesus. That says something. Jesus cared for this man, and he showed it with his actions. That's easier said than done for some of us. Sometimes the Lord may speak to us and show us that, hey, I want you to care for this soul. I think it was, I can't remember the guy's name now off the top of my head. He pastors the Brooklyn Tabernacle, Jim Cymbala. I remember him telling a story about a service that they had. And at the end of the service, he had been sitting on the platform in the front. And he said this drunkard man started making his way toward him. And he had seen him several different times. And he was praying inwardly and saying, Lord, please help me. This man smells like urine, alcohol, feces. He stinks so bad, it wrenches my stomach. And the Lord said to him, but I died for this man. And Jim Cymbala said, Lord, you're right. And if you want me to minister to this man, then you're going to have to fill me with the love of Christ. And he said, Jesus filled him with the love of Christ so overflowing at that moment that he saw that man in a different light than he ever had, and was able to go up to that man, give him a full hug, and to talk with him and pray with him. And from what I remember, I think that man gave his heart to Jesus because that man saw the love of Christ in Jim Cymbala. This is just real world today examples. Well, that is the heart of Jesus. He wants to help people no matter how ruined and busted they are. May God help us to know what to do in each of these situations. When this leprous man, full of leprosy, came to Jesus, it says he saw Jesus, and he knelt before him and fell on his face, imploring him and begging him. This gives us a picture. First of all, this man, he felt so unworthy, and yet he saw something in Christ that would make him kneel before him, some kingly quality, if you will. So he sees Jesus, and he probably thinks, there he is, the person whom I've been looking for. The one who can help me. If anyone can help me, it's this man, Jesus, that I've been hearing about. And maybe just overcome with emotion and gratitude and so many other thoughts probably going through his mind. Everyone else run away, but there he stands firm and planted. He's not running away from me. And he just drops down in front of Jesus on his knees, right before him. And that wasn't enough. He fell right down on his face first down into the dust. bowing before his majesty, bowing before this king, which, by the way, we're told in Isaiah 53 that there's no form or comeliness nor beauty that we should behold him. Jesus was nothing special. He wasn't a handsome man. He wasn't this winsome man like American Christianity, just a normal guy. And yet, this leper, he said, in that man is my hope and is my all. And in that man is a kingly man, a kingly being, is God in the flesh. And so he falls on his face and he implores him, begging like a pauper. He didn't have anything. What was he going to offer Jesus? I'll pay you such and such if you heal me. This man had nothing. He was the outcast of society. He's out there quarantined from everybody else because of the leprosy that he had. But he implores him and begs him, please help me. Oh, if you could do something. Oh, that was the cry of his heart. And these are the words that come out of this man full of leprosy. Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. If you will. So here it shows this leprous man was in subjection to Jesus Christ. He said, if you will, if you want to, you can make me clean of leprosy. I think packed in these phrases also, there's no other soul on earth that could clean me from this leprosy. Only you can do it. If it's your will, if you want to, then you can make me clean. You can see the hope in his voice, the hope and desperation inside of his words. And there he is, bowing before the kingly Jesus. And it says something here. Jesus was moved with pity. How many times have you and I perhaps been moved with pity? You've seen probably those commercials. You see magazine advertisements of, those in third world countries in Africa starving, and the kids have, I can't remember what it's called, but their stomachs are distended, pushed way out. They're skinny and you can see all their bones and stuff, and yet their stomach is pushed out because they don't have any food and sickness and troubles are plaguing them, and they look so bad, and then they give some appeal trying to get you to give some money or offering to them. We look at something like that, we're moved with pity. I just saw this post. I want to say it's Kensington Ave in Philadelphia, where they said it was just like a drug avenue. There's ladies there that are pregnant, passed out on fentanyl. Men passed out on fentanyl in their own feces, hardly clothed. There they are, all laid out, trying to buy drugs just to get through the next day. And I remember looking at that and looking at these pictures. It's quite provocative, and it grieved me in my heart. But I guess what I was thinking is, am I moved with pity like Jesus would be? Like, am I going to do something about this? I guess providentially at this moment, I'm not going to do anything about it because I don't live in Philadelphia. But this is the thing. Jesus saw this leprous man. He saw the hopelessness that was coming out of this man's mouth and voice, and he was moved with pity insomuch that Jesus did something about it. And he stretched out his hand and he touched him. And at this moment, you could probably hear the gasp in the crowds that were around him. Can't believe he's touching him. Oh, he's going to be leprous now. Nobody should touch a leprous person except the priest. And maybe Jesus is making a point. He's the great high priest. But he touches him. Can you imagine what that feels like to have like virtually no human contact outside the leper colony, and then somebody with kindness and love in their eyes reaches out and touches you? Maybe we can relate to that a little bit right now because all the quarantines that happened regarding the COVID pandemic, that we were quarantined, we couldn't be around family and whatever, did something to our mental health, did something to our emotional well-being, and really in a negative manner. And people try and make it so that Zoom maybe could fill that in, or video conferencing calls. It doesn't. The human touch is something extraordinary. And here Jesus reaches his hand out and touches this leper. That communicated so much more than words could have at that point. But Jesus added to his touch these words, I will be clean. So now Jesus is saying, I do want to help you. And I'm going to speak those words of power and command. Be clean. And it says, immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. Now, there's one account that I can think of in the Old Testament, which was Naaman, who wasn't even an Israelite, that was healed in an instant after he washed down at the Jordan River of his leprosy because the prophet had told him to do so. Other than that, leprosy was kind of this gradual thing that either got better or got worse, but never really just in an instant was something taken care of. However, at this moment, he touched the man and said, "I will be thou clean." In one moment, Jesus spoke the word, and the man was clean. You can imagine what reaction this man had. I'm healed. He sensed it. He knew it immediately, right then and there, and everybody else around knew that it happened immediately. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been written down in the eyewitness account. But it did happen immediately. And Jesus sternly charged him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priests and offering for your cleansing the gift that Moses commanded for a proof to them." Why did he say that? He wanted this man to follow the laws that were already set up from the Old Testament, because he wanted the testimony to be to the priests. There has come that one, that Messiah, that Christ, that anointed one that has been prophesied about throughout the entire Old Testament. Here he is, and he has healed somebody. And, these priests would have known the lepers and whatever, because they were in charge of, sending them out and separating them from the rest of the population. And they would have to come back to be examined if they were going to get reentry. So they knew who these people were. And Jesus said, "Go to them. Before you go make a testimony abroad everywhere else, go give your testimony to the priests and follow things according to the law." And I think it was because Jesus didn't want a stumbling block in the way of these religious leaders. He wanted things to be followed by a T, and that would get a hold of them, that they would realize that Messiah, he's here. The problem was with this man, he went out and he began to talk freely about it. And he spread the news about what had happened to him, so that now it says even more the report about Jesus went abroad. Jesus sternly spoke to him and said, "Don't do it." And yet the man couldn't contain himself. Can you blame the guy? If you were for, say, 20 or 30 years separated from society with a terrible disease and in one instant healed, you're probably going to tell people about it. And that's what it's like when Jesus does something even for us in our soul. We want to tell people about it. We can't hold it in. And this man did it. And he did it so much, telling others what had happened to him and how he had been healed, that Jesus, he couldn't any longer openly enter town. He had to go in secret to places because people were looking for him all over now and thinking, man, if he can do it for that man, then he can do it for me. And that really is the right way to think. If Jesus can do this for one soul, he can do it for any soul. He's no respecter of person. He will not cast out anybody that comes to him, he said. And so the news spread. Can't openly enter any town, but he would have to go out in desolate places, out in the desert, in the wilderness. And then great crowds, it says, gathered to him from every quarter to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. So even when he was trying to get away from people, they were flocking to him from all different directions, trying to get a glimpse of this Christ. And so, and they were healed of their infirmities, but he oftentimes had to withdraw to desolate places again and pray because he had no personal space. So Jesus cares for these people. And in the midst of this, look what God does through Christ. And look at all these people and their response to come to Christ to see about this Messiah, this one that healed. So, dear listener, is this you? Are you the one that you feel like you're the outcast of society, that perhaps there's no hope for you? People don't seem to really like you. They think you're not clean or whatever, and they won't come around you. I just want to tell you, Jesus will come around you. And Jesus can help some of his followers to help you if they allow him to work in their hearts. So, dear listener, don't give up hope. There is one. Certainly, you're not as bad as the leper who's so grossly contagious that people are going to catch some terrible disease just by being in your presence. He wants to help you, dear listener. And your next step is to call 570-362-7782 or email gods.resistance@gmail.com and get in contact with me. I'd like to meet with you. I'd like to pray with you. I'd like to help you along in your journey. If you have it, go to social media, Facebook, YouTube, Gab, type in God's Resistance, follow, like, share with your friends about this broadcast as well as our social media accounts. But above all, listen to the voice of Jesus, give your heart to him, and join the resistance, God's resistance. special thank you to Spectacular Sound Productions for giving permission for the use of the song Heroes and Monsters, which was edited and used in part on this production. The permission was granted under Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International Creative Commons license. That license may be found at https://creativecommons.org/licenses/by-sa/4.0/legal code.